Welcome back to YellowCard Vanguard. I'm your host, Toku from It's Toku TV on Twitch. Throughout the week, I'm streaming Vanguard on my Twitch channel. We'll be building decks, playtesting, and just having a grand old time, so be sure to swing on by. With new Clan Collection reveals coming out every day, you know what that means. It's time for a new chapter of Clan Collection Cores. I want to preface this video and the entirety of the series by saying that many of these lists are entirely conceptual and surface deep, and will need your own playtesting to fine-tune. But each of these will aim to provide a way of thinking on how to take your new support in Clan Collection 3 and 4 and put it into a working deck. They won't all be optimized, but I believe they will be a good baseline to build off of. Welcome to Clan Collection Cores. Dungaree is back, baby, and what a unique way for his entrance. Ever since Vanquisher released, Vanquisher has held the throne of Narukami's best deck in V Premium. Boasting an unrivaled amount of advantage, does Dungaree have what it needs to take the throne? Let's take a look together. Sealed Demon Dragon Dungaree. At the beginning of your battle phase, if your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, you may bind the top card of your deck. Then, on the Vanguard circle, or Rearguard circle, when Dungaree attacks, put all of the cards from our bind zone to drop and perform the following based on how much were sent. 2 or less, Dungaree loses 10k, loses a crit, and loses 2 drive. 4 or more, your opponent chooses a card from their hand and binds it. 5 or more, you choose up to 3 cards from drop and return them to the deck and shuffle. So first thing to notice when we try to evaluate Dungaree, this is a 17k idiot. This idiot has triple drive from the get-go and has a base 2 crit. Force 2, eat your heart out. But it's not all positives. The fact that Dungaree also activates on the rearguard is probably for the better, but also means that we'll seldom be able to get 2 good Dungaree swings out in one turn without really stretching. And God forbid, we're unable to get at least 3 cards in bind by the time we attack and become even less than a vanilla unit. Now luckily for us, the 17k defensive is conditionless, so we'll always have an effective 5k shield to all cards in hand, and I think that's something that's always overlooked. Now that being said as well, holy shit are his upper tier effects good. Hand ripped 1, shuffle any 3 cards back to deck. This could be the longevity that Narukami was needing. The new grade 2 is Exorcist Mage Renren. When wrote upon, counterblast 1 to check the top 2 cards of your deck, bind 1 and add the other to hand. On the rearguard circle, you can counterblast 1 and bind the top card of your deck, and for each grade of the bound card, Renren gains 5k. If we bound a grade 0, we draw 1 instead. Now, there are 2 counterblast costs associated with Renren, but it does help play into Dungaree's game plan a lot of self-binding, being able to reach upwards of 24k power itself, but for any boost, Renren is both a serviceable attacker and a utility card to get cards into bind. The only downside, once again, would be the counterblast cost. Then our new grade 1 is Exorcist Mage Mew Mew. When word upon, either bind the top card of your deck or leave it on top. And on the rearguard circle, if the opponent's Vanguard is grade 2 or greater, Soul Blast 1, bind a card from hand to draw 1. If nothing else, Mew Mew is cute, but she's also good for the deck to boot. I think you'd always want to just bind the top card of your deck unless it's like a missing grade 2 ride or Dungaree himself if you don't have a copy in hand already, just to make sure you always have at least 3 bind going into grade 3. Her second skill is very good though, being able to cycle for more binds. One thing to mention is that a lot of these ride line retrains have strong effects that happen on ride or when rode upon, which only ever happens once in a game. Yet, we run 4 copies to ensure maximum consistency that it does. What's good about Mew Mew and Renren is that their second effects can happen multiple times throughout a game from a single copy, so that's really good to see. So, I like to define boss units as either supporting units or units that get supported. Something like Gaia Emperor is what I would call a supporting boss unit, having that very strong skill to bolster our rearguards to hit for strong lethal attacks. Whereas, Dungaree is a very self-contained win con in itself, a unit that needs to get supported. 17k, triple drive, 2 crit, hand loop 1, shuffle 3 back, all in one card is very good except for its restriction. So we need to support Dungaree and make sure we'll always have at least 3 cards in bind. Because we understand such, we can very much streamline our deck. Our boss unit, the one and only Dungaree. Now I say one and only, but we are going to run 4. He is the win con in itself, we have to ride him. and rewriting him for soul as well is good. We're also going to run 3 copies of Mighty Bolt Dragoon to find our Dungaree. Mighty Bolts, although will always be 13k due to how often we'll bind, is unfortunately not a card that performs binds itself. So we're only going to run 3 to find Dungaree and to find another grade 3, namely Jaggy Shot Dragoon. Let's break down the rest of the deck. Every other card from now on that I have included has an effect to bind our cards. Let's check it out from the top. As stated before, we are going to run 4 copies of Jaggy Shot Dragoon. Unfortunately, only has 1 line of text in this deck, but a very relevant line of text for us, and that is to bind a card from hand on attack and even get a refund on it being able to draw a card as well if our opponent has no front row. Its defining feature being that the bind does not cost any counterblast or soul. Then in our grade 2 lineup, we're going to run 4 copies of Lenlen for its when rode upon skill to get a card back but also build up our bind. Also has a really great recurring skill on the rearguard circle to continually bind more cards from the top of our deck. Then we run a new promo that has been confirmed for the English release, unlike a certain assault that is pursuing, and that is Dragon Knight Sharafa. He has the ability that when called or guarded with, you can Soul Blast 1 and bind a card from your hand to draw 1, then your opponent does the same. Also has the ability on Rear or Guardian that if any player's cards were bound this turn, Sharafa gains 5k power and 5k shield. So Sharafa is not only a way of binding more cards on both turns, but coupled with Dungaree's base 17k power, makes him a very formidable Guardian as well. Next up, we run 3 copies of Dragon Dancer Barca, another card that reads Soul Blast 1, bind a card from hand, and draw a card. She also provides some soft control, being able to pull back row units up to their front to make them more vulnerable to attacks. Then, we run this 8 card package between 4 copies of Lightning Cannon Eradicator Gongsun and Lightning Gun Eradicator Oban. These 2 make for a very easy 23k column, once again harking back to magic numbers, but they also provide a source of countercharge. And when you're done with them, or need an emergency 2 cards in bind during the attack step, you can use Gongsun's skill to bind the entire column, both yours and your opponent's, to draw 2 cards. Finally, we run 4 copies of Mew Mew. She is our ideal grade 1 ride, because of that costless bind, but she also has that recurring effect in that recurring theme we like, Soul Blast 1, bind 1 card from hand, and draw a card. Hopefully, between our 26 cards that have a source of bind, not including Dungaree's battle phase skill as well, we should never be under 3 bind going into Dungaree's attack. Our trigger lineup is fairly uninspiring. 4 draw sentinels, 4 heal guardians, and 8 criticals. We don't run fronts because we don't rewrite all too much as our main strategy, so we don't go very wide, so focusing on our center stage is better with criticals. Now of note is that despite having 2 venues of counterblast, Lenlen is a very high priority in regard to protect. There is a lot of Soul Blast, bind, and draw, and not a lot of Soul Charge to complement it. So a lot of our counterblast can be siphoned by Lenlen since Dungaree is also counterblastless. Just something to keep in mind before we look at other options to run. So yeah, just like I stated, one of the deck's major weak points will be Soul, so we can look towards cards that help alleviate that. My mind immediately snaps to Eradicator Demolition Dragon. Not only does it go to Soul after you're done with him, he's also permanent on hit pressure to help you draw into your cards that help fulfill more bind, and if we do find that Soul is an issue, please consider Demolition Dragon. We can also look towards Eradicator Sparkling Ray Dragon from the last Clan Collection. It produces some multi-attack into the deck, and also binds itself during the battle phase if we aren't at 3 yet as well. Now, because our deck outside of a few select cards don't really bind our opponent's cards en masse, Spark Rain Dragon probably won't hit for too large and would be more used to snipe your opponent's front row by attacking into one than using its skill to bind the other. And although it will also have another blank effect, we can look at Supreme Army Eradicator Zuitan for the early game. Most times, players will opt not to slam down front row rearguard, so at grade 2, don't hesitate to slam down all the Zuitans you find to cycle them out and to get more soul for all the soul blasting you'll need to do in the later stages of the game. In conclusion, I'm going to hark back onto one of the more popular concepts of Clan Collection Cores, and that is these sets providing new playstyles for these clans. The current reigning champion for Narukami, being Vanquisher, is a very wide-focused deck, looking to make a lot of axle markers and abuse Vanquisher's 10k buff to the front row. Whereas Dungaree is very vertical and self-contained. It's hard to say which one is better because they're both so different in their playstyles, one needing plenty of pieces to support, and the other needing plenty of pieces to support it. If I had to put my finger somewhere though, I would say that Dungaree is just right under Vanquisher. Vanquisher having access to dedicated support and a lot of plussing engine probably pushes it over the top. But We need to respect that Dungaree doesn't need our opponent to be on grade 3 to triple crit them for game, so that's always something to respect. In any case, this has been it from me on this episode of Clan Collection Cores. Be sure to subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Like the video, as it helps motivate us to keep going, and leave a comment down below. Every little bit helps the channel. This has been Toku from the YellowCard Vanguard channel. Toku out.